Hello, everyone, and welcome to another ASUG Partner Webcast. My name is Maureen McInerney, Partner Marketing Specialist here at ASUG, and I'll be your moderator for this event. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for this presentation. Today's webcast is being recorded. The link to the recording and the accompanied slides will be posted to the ASUG website calendar of events, and all registrants will receive a follow-up email with a link to those materials once the webcast has concluded. I'd like to remind our audience members that you can submit your questions at any time during the presentation by clicking the purple Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Today's webcast is Ask a Fixer, Costing versus Account-Based COPA, Understanding the Differences in ECC and S/4HANA, Part 1, sponsored by ERPfixers. And with that, I'll hand it over to Whitney Ball from ERPfixers to get us started today.
Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. We have, as was noted, divided this into two parts based on a high level of interest in the topic. So we're excited to let you know that we have been able to expand this presentation with Paul Ovigel, CEO of ERPfixers, presenting in November on the conversion from costing-based COPA to account-based COPA. We do not have a finalized date on that. We're working on that, and as soon as we know that, we will let you know. So please be on the lookout for that information. So thank you again to ASUG for hosting this Ask a Fixer webcast with ERPfixers, and thank you for your partnership for the entire Ask a Fixer presentation series. Today we have Marjorie Wright from Simply FICO presenting on costing versus account-based COPA, understanding the differences in ECC and S/4HANA. Before we get started, just to update you a little bit on ERPfixers, don't forget that ASUG members have immediate access to ERPfixers platform through the ASUG website. Here you can post a request to find on-demand SAP expertise from one of thousands of skilled SAP experts whom we call the Fixers, who can help you with your system constraints and questions. If you haven't visited the website recently, please take a look. It's www.erpfixers.com, and here you can browse all types of SAP requests that have been posted and answered by our Fixers. We are also offering optimization assessments. For those of you who may not have attended previously the ASUG ERPfixers webcast on optimization assessments, these are short-term targeted best practice processes that we offer that will give you a thorough analysis of your current SAP system processes and make concrete recommendations on ways to reduce your pain points and increase system efficiency. So again, it's looking at your current operating systems and trying to make them more efficient and smooth running for you. Finally, we've reintroduced our popular blog series for the fall, and those will be rolling out on the ERPfixers website very soon. Before I hand over to Margie and before I introduce her, if you could take a few seconds to just look at this online poll. It's an instant poll that we'd like you to answer just the one question on. So we'll pause for about 20 seconds for you to click what is the most relevant to you and then quickly look at those results. So again, the options are on S/4HANA with account-based COPA, how many of you are, that is. Number 2, on S/4HANA but do not use COPA. Not on S/4HANA but use COPA. Not on S/4HANA and do not use COPA. Okay, so that not on S/4HANA but use COPA was almost 60%. That is close to anticipated. Thank you very much for that. And now finally, I'd like to introduce our speaker. We're delighted to welcome Marjorie Wright, SAP consultant and owner of Simply FICO LLC today. Marjorie is a skilled trainer, presenter, and author with years of senior level experience as an SAP project manager, senior project analyst with particular emphases on SAP software business processes, SAP technical configuration, and financial and management accounting. Marjorie also worked for several years with SAP Americas as a senior education consultant before founding Simply FICO in 2014. Please join me in welcoming Marjorie Wright, CEO of Simply FICO. Thank you, Margie.
Hello. Hello, everyone. And Whitney, thank you so much for that introduction.
Thank you.
I'm really glad to be here with everyone today to talk about one of my most favorite topics, COPA, or Profitability Analysis. So you can see I have a couple of specific agenda items to walk through with you this afternoon. First, I want to make sure everyone understands the difference between cost-based and account-based COPA. I was impressed with your poll results, and I noted the majority of you are not S/4HANA but are using COPA now. So we weren't specific in our question about which type of COPA, account-based or cost-based, but I think as we go forward, if you're unfamiliar with either method, you'll have a good basis from this first agenda item. So then I'm going to move through some changes that you can expect as you move to S/4HANA. If that's in your timeline in the future, this presentation will put you in a really good position to talk the talk as you start to think about what will be different in your system in S/4HANA. So first, what is the difference between cost-based and account-based COPA? And I specifically mentioned here, I'm talking about actual postings. So planning is a more complicated topic, and cost-based COPA has many, many planning features. But for our session today, we're just going to focus on actual postings. So those of you familiar with COPA, you'll remember that its job is really contribution margin reporting. So Whitney gave me that great introduction. I used to be a cost accountant. That's kind of buried in my past. So topics like contribution margin are really important to me. I'm really sensitive to what they mean to SAP customers. So in this diagram, I've given you just a really high-level overview of a cost-based COPA report compared to an account-based COPA report. On the left-hand side, you see descriptions of value fields. This is something that always made COPA cost-based a little problematic, getting people to understand this concept of a value field rather than a cost element for analysis purposes. So cost-based COPA leverages value fields, and it has the ability to split fixed and variable cost based on the cost component split from product cost planning. So that's super important if we want to get contribution margin. Account-based COPA was sometimes run in parallel. On the right-hand side of my diagram, you can see the same kind of financial information, but from an account-based point of view. And here we report by cost element. So I have the comment in my slide that this ties to financial accounting. People really like that. They like being able to tick and tie cost element to GL account number. And sometimes in cost-based COPA, the left-hand side, we had a few challenges in tying off to FI. It made people uncomfortable. Both types of COPA report based on this thing called a characteristic, or sometimes SAP describes it as a market segment. It really just means, what do I want to analyze by customer, by product, by region, by business unit. It could be an SAP characteristic, or it could be a characteristic you've defined. So as you're looking at these two different styles of reports, you'll notice that the cost-based report has a lot more detail. It's able to split fixed and variable cost, and it's able to pull out variances from purchasing and from production. Those are really important key figures when we're measuring contribution margin. So cost-based COPA has been heavily used all these many years in SAP. I was an end user of cost-based COPA. So keep that in mind. Prior to HANA, this is our view. Either cost-based or account-based COPA would be in scope. And if you manufacture goods, I'm betting cost-based is what you're using. So as we move forward to some things you can expect in S/4HANA, I want you to notice that I've used the phrase account-based, but truthfully, I think it needs a better name based on my experience with it so far, it's a little more powerful, I should say far more powerful, than our legacy SAP account-based COPA. So as you begin your path to move to S/4HANA, account-based COPA is active by default, and that makes people really nervous. They're like, no, we don't want to do that. We never used it before. We want what we always had, right? But I want to open your mind a little bit today by explaining some of the new features in S/4HANA account-based COPA that help me to let go a little bit of my reluctance to losing or leaving behind cost-based. Cost-based COPA can still be activated in an S/4HANA system. You can continue to do everything you've always done. But I hope after our presentation today you feel comfortable with some of the newer features that maybe make that obsolete. So I've listed 3 of the features here on this slide, and I'll talk about each one in a little detail. Cost of goods sold refinement is a huge step forward for account-based COPA. It's going to give me more detail about the nature of the cost. Price splitting has to do with production variance settlement. Typically, cost-based COPA is where we broke out all of the 8 categories of production variance into a separate value field. Well, now I can get that by GL account number. Then a relatively new feature called attributed profitability segment. I'll hold off explaining anything about that for just a few moments. But to me, these 3 features really move us forward. And I kind of prefer to talk about COPA now, as you see in parentheses here, as a profitability analysis tool found in the Universal Journal of S/4HANA. Not quite like your father's account-based COPA, something a little better. So my next diagram, I'm sure you've seen some variation of in your review and understanding of the move to S/4HANA. In the middle of the diagram is this amazing thing called the Universal Journal, or some of us refer to it as AC.A, its technical name. And the beauty of this is that the HANA database has a different way of reading and storing data to make it possible to have this one massive table for reporting purposes. And this one massive table includes information that used to be found in separate tables in SAP. That's the really big excitement around HANA. So in this diagram, notice I have profitability circled in red, and I show you in the AC.A, or Universal Journal of HANA, we'll find all of the COPA characteristics and values in that single table that used to be held in different tables depending on the kind of COPA you were using. So all of our characteristic values are found in AC.A. Big step forward, right? If we take that a little further and talk a little more about cost of goods sold refinement, if I can get my cost of goods sold for post-goods issues reported based on the cost component structure of the material using specific general ledger account numbers for each cost component, that's pretty mind-bending for us traditional SAP COPA users. And truthfully, when I first heard this, I thought, why do I want that in my general ledger? Because I have cost-based COPA, and I know where to find that information there. But I had to open my mind a little further and think back to AC.A. If I can have the cost component split at the company code level, pointing cost of goods sold to unique GL account numbers, that's going to feed AC.A. And then I pick up all of my COPA characteristics relative to customer material, etc. in AC.A, and my reporting dilemmas are solved. So this is a screenshot of what the cost of goods sold refinement setting looks like in config. And I know that not everyone on the call today is technical, but sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And you can see in this diagram that the left-hand column has a list of cost components that comes from my cost component structure, which has its roots in product cost planning. Each cost component can be assigned to a specific general ledger account number. And now, not only in the general ledger, hello guys, I'm so sorry my audio was dropped just quickly there. I think I'm back. I think you can hear me now. Whitney, Maureen,
You're back,
yes?
Marjorie.
Thank
Yes, you are back.
Sorry guys, completely dropped there. Probably my excitement over cost of goods sold refinement. So as I was mentioning, my cost components from my cost component structure can be assigned to a GL account number. I'll have all of that detail in AC Doc A. Now, where this is found in the configuration menu is kind of a mystery. It's not in the COPA set of folders. It's under General Ledger Accounting, Periodic Processing. So for your reference, I've given you that menu path in this slide so you can go take a look at this. So again, the benefit here is I get detail by the cost component of the cost estimate of the item I sold to break out cost of goods sold. So that was the first really important step. The next really big improvement is being able to see production variances in the same way. When I'm making product in the factory, there are 8 variance categories that we can assign to value fields in cost-based COPA. The general ledger doesn't normally care about that. They don't want that kind of detail. So a single GL account number is assigned through account determination. But in S/4HANA, we have this feature called a splitting profile. And again, it's being assigned at the company code level. Here's an example of what it looks like in config. So once more, it's sort of buried in the financial accounting config menu path in a really interesting place, not where one would normally think we would find this. So I've given you the menu path here. And you can see from my screenshots that each line in the splitting structure is assigned to a variance category. The variance categories are the same 8 we've always had in cost object controlling. So each category is then assigned to a general ledger account number in that target account column. So one more time, at first I kind of scratched my head, why do I want that in my general ledger? But remember, I was a cost-based COPA user. Well, the reason I want that in my general ledger is because I needed an AC Doc A. So if I have cost of goods sold and production variances now available at the GL account level with all of my COPA characteristics, I sort of feel more comfortable about this change. I think I can let go of some of my love of cost-based COPA. One of the remaining features that was still kind of hanging out there for me is, what about it if I have an internal order, or more commonly a project system that settles to a profitability segment? I don't get visibility of that on the profitability segment until the settlement occurs. Well, that's where this third new feature, attributed profitability segment, moves me much closer to real-time information at the profitability segment level. We can indicate in customizing which of the cost objects you see in this list we want the system to create what we're calling an attributed profitability segment. So if my order or my project system has a profitability segment as the settlement receiver, while I'm spending money for the order or the project, the system can read the profitability segment in the settlement rule and statistically assign a profitability segment along with the real cost object of the order or the WBS on the project. So this gets me more real-time information. Of course, at settlement at period end, we would have the real assignment to the profitability segment. So think of this as a statistical view until period end. In my next slide, I have a couple of screenshots of where you can find this in customizing. So in the Profitability Analysis IMG folder under Master Data is where we make the activation. And you can see my various cost objects listed here. Now in my diagram, I have Cost Center as the view. And notice how P&L account has a checkbox. In hindsight, maybe I should have used project as my screenshot, because with orders, projects, sales orders, we can also capture some balance sheet accounts with a profitability segment statistically. Seems strange to say those words, doesn't it, if you're a real CO user? But what about work in process? What about revenue accruals from project systems, from WBS elements? It would be really helpful to see those values with my profitability segment characteristics. So for orders, projects, sales orders, I have another column there to check for balance sheet accounts. Things like WIP would be important. Results analysis would be important. Again, this will be considered statistical until the real settlement occurs, but this moves me much closer to having real-time information. So those are some of the big changes that have been talked about for a year or so to help us kind of move from what I've come to call our legacy SAP ERP system over to an S/4 HANA platform. A question that was still in my mind, even when I was introduced to those new features, was how much detail do I really get in that universal journal? So I captured some screenshots for you so that you have a better feel for what this means to reporting. First of all of our usual COPA characteristics are going to be derived. Whatever is in the derivation strategy is still going to be derived. If we're using a statistical profitability segment, the previous example for attributed profitability segment, there's a specific field in AC Doc A that tells me what the real CO account assignment is. So it's easy for me to make a distinction. The last bullet point on the slide is my favorite one. Fixed cost is reported from CO to AC Doc A. So it's really great that I could get variances from production at the GL account level. It's really great that I could get cost of goods sold split by cost component, but without separating fixed and variable, my contribution margin was still lacking. But now in AC.A, I can see fixed cost. So I did a couple of screenshots for this presentation of a post-goods issue, and I started with KE24. And I know sometimes looking at slides, it's kind of hard to see the detail. But in the background of this slide, there are actually two documents. There's the plain old cost of goods sold posting for about 126 euros. And then there are line items below that to break out based on the cost component of the cost of goods sold to individual GL account numbers. This is an account-based KE24 view. So my account-based COPA document is in the background. And this would be a screenshot of just the journal itself in FB03. The document that I'm displaying here is the refinement document. Cost of goods sold is posted first based on the account assignment, and then a second document reverses that cost of goods sold and splits across my cost components. So KE24 looks good, FB03 looks good. What about AC.A? So AC.A is just really a massive table, massive number of columns. And by the way, when you generate your operating concern for COPA, the characteristics that you've selected, excuse me, are extended into AC.A. So looking at this example of AC.A, I just highlighted a couple of columns that are important. This is that accounting document from an AC.A point of view. And I drew a box around the account number because, again, the cost of goods sold refinement leverages GL account numbers. Then I drew a box around the amount in company code currency. And then the last column that I found interesting in this view was the fixed amount, the fixed cost. I wanted you to see that I have all of the detail I need for contribution margin right here in AC.A. Then I also wanted to remind you that all of my COPA characteristics are available here. So I highlighted a subset of the table here to show you the material number, the country, a few other fields that we generally like to see when we're doing contribution margin. So a post-goods issue has a ton of characteristic derivation happening from the material and from the customer, from the plant. So I wanted you to feel comfortable that contribution margin reporting needs are going to be met right here. So once I understood this drive of SAPs to go from cost component to GL account so that I have all of this detail in AC.A, I still had a few concerns because, again, I was a cost-based COPA user for many, many years, and I was a little worried about some other features that I like to have. Then many of you may be aware of a conference that happens each September in San Diego, a controlling conference. And I attended that just last week and had the rest of my concerns kind of put to rest. And I'm so glad to be able to share that with you because 1809 was released on Friday. And during that event last week, we had the infamous Janet Salmon speaking. And on Tuesday morning, her big topic was, what's new in 1809? And I was furiously making notes. So some of the things that worried me, what about incoming sales orders? I was a big fan of record type A and cost-based COPA. Those of you that use it may know what I'm talking about. I want to see contribution margin for incoming sales orders prior to post-goods issue. I had a few other things on my open concern list as well. So here are some things that I learned just last week that I'm really happy to share with you about 1809 that, again, I feel move us even closer to not having a requirement for cost-based COPA in S/4HANA. I'll mention first of all record type A. It is now possible to see that in an S/4HANA report, but not in my leading ledger. So there's a new feature in 1809 when ledgers are created in the general ledger config. There's another flag to define a ledger as a prediction or simulation ledger, and record type A can be posted there. I also had a concern about statistical SD conditions. We liked to use those pretty often in cost-based COPA. Well, they can also show up in my prediction or simulation ledger. There's a new checkbox on the SD condition type in 1809. And a last concern for things that I had used heavily in the old world or CO commitments, the ability to see open purchase order values by cost object. That kind of information can now be reported in the prediction or simulation ledger in 1809. So that checked a lot of boxes for me, some concerns that I still had, knowing how most cost-based customers use that information. I felt we still needed that in S4. I've already mentioned work in process by mentioning I can have a checkbox for my orders and my projects to evaluate the balance sheet side of the posting with a profitability segment. So 1809 takes us a little further in the ability to have work in process reported by COPA characteristic. How many years have we asked for that as cost accountants, right? Some more detail in my general ledger. There are also some new features to bring in the actual cost component split if you're using material ledger actual costing. So when you go through the periodic process of settlement, for many SAP customers, it's important to bring in that actual cost estimate to a COPA value field in cost-based COPA. Now we can get the actual cost component split in our universal journal reporting. The last really big feature that was exciting for me was a new set of standard delivered semantic tags for reporting purposes that automatically bring in fixed and variable from AC.A. So again, those of you that are cost-based COPA users now, you understand how important that is. It has been for all these years the place for cost accountants to get contribution margin. So I pose the question to my clients now, and I pose it to you to think about a little bit. Understanding some of the new features and benefits that are being deployed, especially these changes in 1809, I'm leaning more and more towards supporting profitability analysis from the Universal Journal. There may still be some business cases for cost-based COPA, but I truly feel that SAP has really laid the foundation to have one source for all of that detail in a way that we've really been asking for many years. So once again, the cost of goods sold refinement by GL account number, production variances, having our variance category assigned to a GL account number, attributed profitability segments, being able to have a more real-time view on a statistical profitability segment of what settlement would be, the ability to have fixed and variable cost, and now with 1809, the prediction or simulation ledger, being able to have incoming sales orders and statistical SD conditions in a report. I think we really can't call it account-based COPA anymore. It's far more robust than that original product. So I'll hand this over to Maureen for your questions.
Thank you, Marjorie. As you mentioned, we're now moving on to our question and answer portion of the webcast. If you have any questions, please submit them using the purple Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If for some reason we don't get to your question today, ERPfixers will follow up after the webcast. We do have some questions in here right now, so I'll go ahead and start with those. The first question, if a company using cost-based in ECC, it is not as simple as turning on account-based COPA. There are a lot of posting changes that have to happen, correct? How much work is that?
So that is a really good question, and you're right, they're not exactly one-to-one in alignment. So you really have to determine your business process under cost-based COPA. So for example, there is a KE21N where you can manually create a posting to cost-based COPA that was not allowed for account-based and would not be allowed going forward. So you'd have to look at your business reason for using a feature like that and find an alternative way around it. There would also be some time, you would need to spend some time looking at your historical data and determining how that gets migrated. There isn't a really good tool provided by SAP right now to migrate cost-based COPA data to the Universal Journal. I think Central Finance has some features, so hopefully they'll make it over to the non-Central Finance, maybe in next year's release. But yes, we definitely have to spend a little time looking at those other processes and determining how we're going to meet it in a non-cost-based COPA environment. That's a good question.
Thank you. The next question, what if you are shipping from DCs or ICs? Do the variances and CCS flow through?
So they should. There are a couple of business add-ins that might help with that, to use an alternative cost estimate or specifically in drop ships where there's no real post-goods issue. So there are two new business add-ins that will help address those problems.
Thank you. The next question, in the configuration screens you showed for the COGS and prod variance accounts, there is a default field on the right-hand side of the screen. What is that for?
That's a really good question. You're really, really observant on a Thursday afternoon. So by checking the default box for an account, you're indicating that if there's something you missed in your mapping, so let's use the cost of goods sold example. If there's some other cost component that has a small value and you don't want it to have its own GL account number, the default checkbox means include that value here. So we could say anything that wasn't, any cost component not specifically assigned to a cost element or a GL account in that view, the default checkbox would mean put that value here, right? Good question.
Thank you. The next question, how do we get the COPA characteristics posted to ACDOCA in S4HANA?
So the system is going to be deriving characteristics for COPA the same way it always has. We have a derivation strategy, right? So when we generate our operating concern or regenerate our operating concern, AC.A is extended with a column for each characteristic of the operating concern. So the system is just accumulating the value the same as it always has been using the derivation strategy, except now instead of going to our CO tables, it's transferring those characteristic values to AC.A. It's like a thing of beauty, right?
Thank you. The next question, is there possible the integration between account-based COPA and other ledgers besides the leading ledger? For instance, if I want to use more parallel ledgers, am I able to use that information as the base to a COPA report?
That's a really good question. I'm reading it now and kind of thinking through how things are assigned. The only thing that would be different across parallel ledgers would be the valuation is what I'm thinking. So I mean, in AC Doc A, all ledgers are listed. They're just a separate document. So I believe that the value would be there. I might want to do a quick test on that to confirm it, but since each ledger is a separate line in AC Doc A, I think the characteristics are going to be present.
Thank you. The next question. To get all this extra COPA costing info in ACDOCA, sounds like there can be a lot of extra configuration steps to analyze and complete.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. So if we think back to the complexity of configuring actual postings for cost-based COPA, those of you who are familiar with it, you can kind of visualize the config menu. There was a separate folder for each kind of activity. Was it order settlement? Was it direct from FI? What was the source of the activity? So now I don't need all of those steps. That was a huge folder for actual costing, cost-based COPA. Now I need two things, maybe some variations of those two things. And those two things are the cost of goods sold refinement, the splitting structure for that, and the splitting structure for production variances. So it may feel like it's extra config, but to me, the cost of goods sold refinement and the production variance splitting, they replace that long menu for actual posting in the cost-based COPA config. So I think it's a win.
Thank you. What's the benefit using KE24 instead of using any general ledger report when using COPA account-based?
That's a really good question as well. If you're working with account-based COPA, then KE24 is going to look just like your FI document if you're specifically, let's say, if you're new GL, because they're the same. Account-based COPA only gets a posting when financial accounting gets a posting, right? One of the benefits of people who like to tick and tie. So perhaps in KE24, if I just want to see values by a specific characteristic, and here we're talking about a non-HANA system, right? So if I want to see values by strategic business unit, that's not going to be in my general ledger report, right? Because it was only captured in the CO table in a non-HANA system. In a HANA system, in S4HANA, we could say that there's no benefit of using KE24 because AC Doc A holds all of the information. It was a good question.
Thank you. The next question, what replaces KE21N for account-based in HANA?
So KE21N was not available for account-based even prior to HANA, maybe KE21S simulation, but N is an actual posting. And we weren't allowed to create a posting in account-based COPA that did not come from FI because they have to tie. So I think the simulation transaction is still alive and well in HANA, the KE21S simulation, and I can toggle between cost and account-based for simulation because there often we're trying to prove out our derivation strategy. If I'm wrong, again, I'm just kind of working from memory here, if KE21S is not in the menu, but I believe it is, you could always just simulate your derivation strategy, right? So N was never available for account-based COPA. S, if not still there, the alternative method would be simulate the derivation strategy. Good question.
Thank you. The next question. So in S4HANA, the operating concern has to be regenerated after the S4HANA conversion steps are completed?
So I'm going to ask if we can defer that question to Paul's session in November about conversion. Okay. It seems to me, logically speaking, that that's a true statement. But Paul Overgil is really the expert on conversion. He's done several of those, and he would have the absolute correct answer for you.
Not a problem. We'll save that one as well. Another question in here. We currently are using cost-based COPA to provide CM reports for comparison of actual to budget. How will we be able to load plan/budget data into account-based COPA?
And that is a really good question. And plan values are still on my open concern list. So there is an equivalent to AC.A. There's an AC.P table. However, on the account-based side, all of that planning needs to come from the new integrated BPC planning product. So we don't use the same planning tools we knew and loved from the ERP system. So that's still an open question for me to see SAP address, is how can we streamline our planning process for COPA.
Thank you. The next question, with attributed profitability segment, what happens when there is a change to one of the characteristics? Does this change get reflected in the Universal Journal?
That's a really good question as well. So the change does get reflected. So it is always possible between the time of creating the settlement rule for an object and the actual settlement. It is always possible for a characteristic value to change or for additional characteristic values to be present at settlement. So those will be captured with the real posting to the profitability segment, and they will be in AC.A for reporting purposes.
Thank you. The next question. I have heard that there is something called combined profitability analysis. Will this also be available in the Universal Journal?
So combined profitability analysis is a really interesting feature. It's been around even before S4HANA. And the general advice on that feature is it was created by the support people at SAP, not by the developers. So it was a way for people to have account-based and cost-based data in one table for reporting. Combined COPA will not be in AC.A. It has its own table structure and its own reporting feature.
Thank you. The next question, will a posting that does not come from PGI, such as material ledger revaluation of consumption, also be split in the COGS account?
So that kind of posting can be split. So there is a new business add-in to include postings that don't necessarily come from a PGI to get the split for cost of goods sold. So we would use that business add-in to meet that requirement.
Thank you. Next question, can characteristic realignment still be done to change history?
It can be, but it's still imperfect. Will be the polite way to say that. So characteristic realignment is still available, but many features that we relied on in the legacy SAP system are still on the development list for S4HANA, and some characteristics can be realigned, others still under development.
The next question, can the COGS account split be done for the main cost component structure only, or can it be done for the auxiliary cost component structure?
That's a really good question as well. So it can be done for any cost component structure. So that is one of the parameters of the splitting profile, in addition to chart of accounts and controlling area. So yes, it can be split using any cost component structure.
Thank you. So next question, in ECC, when you post to a cost center and COPA at the same time, the cost center posting is statistical. In S4HANA with attributed profitability segment on a cost center, is the cost center posting real or statistical?
In that case, the cost center posting would be real. So SAP still uses the same logic of one real CO account assignment. So the attributed profitability segment would be the statistical object, and the cost center would be the real object. At the time of assessment, most likely for the cost center at period end, going from cost center to profitability segment, the profitability segment would then become the real cost object.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. That looks like all of the questions in our Q&A right now. I'll hand it back to you for any closing remarks before we close the webcast today.
Thanks, Maureen. So thank you, everyone, for your attention and for your excellent questions. I hope that this has opened your eyes a little bit to other possibilities outside of our cost-based environment. S/4HANA still has a lot of development in process, and as customers review these new features and give SAP feedback, it's really a dynamic give and take, I feel, at this point in time. New features are coming to the market more quickly based on feedback. So if you have other questions, you can always contact us at ERPfixers. You can see the email address in the slide. And again, thank you so much for your time and your attention. And tune in next month for Paul's continuing session. Thank you.
Thank you again, Marjorie and Whitney, for a great webcast. On behalf of ASUG, I'd like to thank ERPfixers as well as everyone who took the time today to attend this webcast. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question or you still have any, they will be following up with you after the webcast. Before we go, we'd like to leave you with some quick information on ASUG with anyone unfamiliar with our user group. ASUG helps connect SAP customers to the people and information that they need to maximize their investment in SAP. If you'd like to speak to someone about becoming a member of ASUG, please message info@asug.com. As mentioned before, the recording and slides from today's program will be posted to the ASUG website, and all registrants will receive a follow-up email. Please take a moment to complete the survey by clicking on the green button at the bottom of your screen. With that, I'd like to close today's webcast. Have a wonderful day, everyone.